So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the same nightmare week after week. UK firms fed up with post-Brexit EU trade. So here you have Mark Beardsley of KMet, a manufacturer of tea trolleys, trays and hot plates. So Mark Brearley is still frustrated by Brexit, which is no surprise really. Britain's formal withdrawal from the EU on terms agreed by the Johnson government, exporting the goods his company produces hasn't got any easier for the London-based manufacturer. And I imagine that making, things like hot plates, metals, you still potentially face rules of origins issues as well. And this article, it talks a lot more about rules of origins issues that different companies face in terms of clothing, which we'll talk about towards the end of the article. But describing as the same nightmare week after week, a lot more time is spent with things going wrong. The EU really feels like the hardest place in the world to ship things to sometimes. And I wonder why that is. Is it down to the EU stringent checks on third countries? Is it down to pallet sizes? Is it a mixture of the two? I don't know. He sold tea trolleys, trays and hot plates from his factory just off Old Kent Road. Old Kent Road, I'm convinced, is in monopoly to customers including the British royal family. The company sells goods in more than 40 countries around the world, so they're going to have experience dealing with EU and non-EU countries. So for him to say that the EU feels like the hardest place in the world to export to, I imagine it's down to the EU's checks on third country goods. That's the only thing that could make sense here. Because, the bloc's designed to trade internally as much as it can do. It's designed to keep out third countries because, there's potential money that an EU manufacturer could make. But leaving the EU has added to Mr. Braley's costs and makes selling items abroad more difficult. There's loads of things that I could have been doing if it wasn't for these problems. Probably playing golf or doing actual work. We could do things that take us forward rather than back. So, instead of being able to expand his business and export into more places, what's happened is he's got to try and fight for what he already had. The existing trade he already had. Official figures show that UK exports to the EU remain significantly below pre-Brexit levels, despite some recovery from an initial plunge in January, where I think exporters were just trying to figure out what the hell was going on and trying to find customs agents that could help them. Exports have fallen 40% on the months as traders adapted to new trade rules and border delays, but came back to finish last year down 11%. Compared with 2018. So you can see there a non-pandemic year. 2018 is an interesting pick. I'd gone with 2019, but trade is down, exports are down. That's the key point here. Concern is mounting that fresh Brexit roadblocks are looming as the government threatens to tear up the protocol, which could lead to a trade war. And then not only do you have all of these customs checks, etc., but you're going to have tariffs. And if you have tariffs, I think a lot of these businesses will just stop trading altogether with the EU. Despite Boris Johnson claiming to have got Brexit done, his government now views this as a central plank of his deal as broken. It's talking about the protocol here. There's a sense of, oh God, here we go again, said really. I've said his name about 3 different ways here. Who worries that KMet will suffer if the EU responds with fresh trade barriers. And to be fair, that very much feels like a likely scenario, which is something we'll talk about in another video. Raoul Ruparel is someone, we've covered articles by him in the past, who was Theresa May's special advisor on Europe, says companies could start dusting down their old no-deal Brexit plans if the situation worsens. Any business will tell you it's unhelpful, he says. In this case, a lot of them are just getting on with it and they just have to make the best of it because it's the government that kind of sets out the trade terms. It's for businesses to try and make the most of it. The problems are our trade terms suck. But what they don't want is constantly changing rules with the EU. If suddenly tariffs are implemented, it changes a lot of things for them. It changes their business model completely because their goods can go up between 5 to 40%, for example, a 40% tax on their goods, and it's not going to make it viable for them to trade. There could, however, be economic costs. Stefan Bull, the former chair of Philip Hammond's Council of Advisors when he was Chancellor, that's former Chancellor Philip Hammond, one of the most boring men on the planet, and now chief UK economist at Goldman Sachs, says the most likely outcome is a compromise deal. And I asked this question genuinely, do you mean a compromise deal as in something existing within the protocol, like the October proposals, or are you talking about a completely renegotiated deal? Because those are two very different things here. Still, risks of significant economic impacts loom if one isn't reached, he warns. And I do wonder if he's doing a good job at Goldman Sachs, because, the UK were very close to a no deal under Theresa May. However, she kind of reneged in the end and she got an extension from Brussels. So maybe this person knows what they're talking about. I don't know. Prospect of a trade war with potential tariffs imposed, he says, is possible, but it's very unlikely in our view. I think it's very likely. unless Johnson comes down from the place he's at now, which I don't think will happen. But then again, there are rumours that he's very angry at Liz Truss over the protocol shenanigans, which we'll talk about in a separate article that's coming up. Or might have talked about it already, depending on how scheduling works, time travel and stuff. Even with the current deal, the OBR Treasury Economics forecaster expects Brexit to cost the economy 4% of GDP over the next 15 years. And that's under the current deal we have. If it was a no-deal Brexit, it would have been 2% higher. It would have been 6% of our GDP gone. And that's double the long-term impact of the pandemic, which is crazy that Brexit has cost so much more than the pandemic has when you think of the cost of the pandemic itself. Exports of clothes and footwear to the EU are both down by 60%. Compared with 2018, meat exports have plunged by 2015, vegetables and fruit by 40%, and car exports are down more than a quarter. So if we break down each one, right, so clothing and footwear, those don't really fall into the trade deal because of rules of origins, because a lot of the clothing is made in Asia, for example. That's a big problem. Meat exports face SPS checks, and that's very expensive. Same with vegetables and fruit. Car exports are down. That could be down to rules of origins checks, which would make sense, but also down to the fact that the UK isn't manufacturing as many cars as it used to in years gone by. You can see the total exports here gone down. Total exports down 8.3%, cars down by 27%, fish 5%, which I thought that would be higher. Food and live animals down almost 8%, clothing down by almost 40%. That's a big number right there. Paul Alger, Director of International Affairs at the UK Fashion and Textile Association, says the outsized hit for his industry, clothing, is probably because many items sold by UK firms do not qualify for the post-Brexit trade deal. Under its terms, goods must meet rules of origin. So if the majority of the clothing item is not made in the UK, it gets hit with tariffs. However, much of the clothing sold by UK retailers is made in Asia or the US, making it ineligible. And you could see double tariffs here potentially, because for the UK to import stuff from Asia, there is normally a tariff. And then for the UK to then export that product to the EU, there's another tariff. So what would make the most sense is for these companies to set up hubs within the EU in order to import directly to the EU, rather than face a scenario where you can see a doubling of tariffs, for example. But, it costs a lot of money to set up hubs in the EU, which some of these smaller businesses won't have. In one example of shifting trade patterns, M&S, Marks & Spencer's, which feels we talk about them a lot, is setting up a new warehouse to handle EU deliveries of clothing and homewares to reduce the impact of tariffs and export costs. Literally the thing I was discussing a minute ago, which M&S can do because they're a big business, but a lot of these smaller traders can't do that. The British High Street stalwart said last week Brexit had cost them £30 million in profit and £15 million in lost trade, and you got to be careful who you vote for. Danny Hodgson runs River and Hyde, which sells quality men's clothing, allegedly. I don't know if they do. I have to check it out myself. He says EU sales, which he spent a decade building, plunged by half in the first month after Brexit and never recovered, because at the end of the day, these are luxury goods which come at a significant cost. And the tariffs and things like that, the VAT, comes at a significant cost, which is something that they're going to have to pay for up front. He says it's really frustrating. River and Hyde has pushed up the prices for EU consumers or customers to include new tariffs, VAT and shipping costs, and at the end of the day, if you're selling directly to customers, they ain't going to want to pay those increased costs. If you're selling directly to other businesses, again, it's the same scenario. He says, I hear Johnson boasting about free trade and the rest of it. I don't know how he's got the brass neck to talk about us doing free trade deals when basically he's the one who imposed sanctions on our businesses. And at the end of the day, if his businesses can't use the Trade and Cooperation Act or agreement, the simple fact is it's going to cost them a lot more to export this stuff. And with the tariffs imposed on top, it's just madness. He says, we were freely trading with the EU, now we've had tariffs imposed on us through our Brexit deal. And, in his case, we have actually imposed sanctions on ourselves, economic sanctions. The only benefit I can say is that if the trade and cooperation deal gets scrapped, at least his business model won't change much, but that's not really going to help him that much. With Britain's economy facing the risk of recession, I think we're going to go into recession towards the end of the year. Amid the cost of living crisis, Hodgson said the government has caused more harm to the British economy that could have been easily avoided. him saying we're less profitable, there's a lot more work involved, there's a lot more hassle, and I'm still slogging away at it in the hope that one day things will improve. But if there was a trade war, it would finish that off. And, he's making less money, less in tax revenue. You could argue that him having to hire more staff, if he is doing that, will help the taxpayer because it means less unemployment, etc. But if he's doing a lot of this work himself or paying for consultants, etc., it's not really going to help the economy that much. And with him, losing money means he's going to cut the cost of his staff anyways, in the sense of he's going to need less people because he's not exporting that much compared to years gone by. His exports have gone down by half. So it's not really going to help his business in any way. It's just wild. You've got that gentleman there. You got this one up here. It's just madness that this has happened. And a lot of businesses who would have supported the Tories in years gone by, a lot of these businesses may have supported Cameron and even Theresa May, for example. I don't think they're going to support Boris Johnson. So the question is, where are their donors going to come from? But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.